Well, hello and welcome again to the Bible teaching ministry of A Love Outreach. My name is Dave Nelson. Today I am going to do something just a bit different than how I normally teach. I had a question sent to me, and I am going to go ahead and do my best to answer this question. And the question is, can virtue be taught? And the question comes to me from the standpoint of virtue being examined as a quality or an attribute. And my understanding of virtue can be summed up best by describing it as moral goodness. It's definitely a character trait. It's definitely a quality or an attribute of one's life. But I do believe that it must be taught. And not only do I believe that it must be taught or that it can be taught, but I also believe that it is of the utmost importance that it is taught in our society today. We are seeing less and less stress being put upon living a virtuous life in our society today. Examples of virtue, right, are things like honesty, compassion, generosity, integrity, modesty, and purity and such, right? And I'm sure there are many other qualities of virtue that I'm not mentioning here, but I just wanted to point out a few of them to you. You see, the book of Proverbs warns against a child being left to themselves. And this speaks of an undisciplined child, someone that has not been taught, someone that has not been instructed in the way that they should go, in a virtuous way, or in the way of righteousness, right? Proverbs also speaks of the fact that there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way of death, and that would be the absolute wrong way, right? And this is the path that one travels. This wrong way I'm speaking of now is the path that one travels on that has not been taught the way of virtue, the way of righteousness, the way of moral goodness. And they've not chosen that path for their own life. Because there's two points to that, right? One must be taught about a virtuous way of life, but then one also must make the choice to walk in that way, right? And in this life, there are many paths that one can choose to walk. And there are right paths and there are wrong paths, right? God's desire is that we walk through this life on the narrow path that is described to us by Jesus Christ. But one must be instructed, and most desirably instructed from their youth to walk in an upright manner, to walk in moral goodness, to walk in virtue. Yes, we know that we all sin, we all fall short of the glory of God. Not one of us has chosen good or righteousness in every moment of our lives, but the majority of the world around us has chosen to remain deeply rooted in, make it a practice in their lives to practice lawlessness, as Jesus called it, right? And they've chosen to remain in that lifestyle. And as a result, they walk in a way that is not in line with virtue, not in line with a straight and narrow path, a way of righteousness. But on the other hand, right, one that is taught in the ways of righteousness and then chooses to walk in that way, right? They make a decision to have virtue as an everyday part of their life, right? Then that there's an impact on that person's life because they've been taught it. And they now walk in that way, okay? It becomes a part of their everyday life, okay? So such virtue that I'm speaking of here is taught to children by parents, or by guardians. And as a result of that teaching, moral goodness becomes rooted and grounded within them. And when we observe the life of a very small child, for example, we notice quickly that they seem to be naturally selfish. For many children, the word mine is a predominant word in their vocabulary. And this is just one example of how we as human beings miss the mark from a very early age. It comes natural to us. So therefore, virtue needs to be taught. A child must be trained up in the way that they should go, in the ways of moral goodness, in the ways of virtue. Thankfully, the Lord has not left us alone. He's not left us to ourselves when it comes to walking in a virtuous manner, right? He has given us His Holy Spirit, whom, in addition to parental guidance that we may have or may not have had in our lives, but we can have the Holy Spirit within us who instructs us in the way that we should go. And we know that the fruit of the Spirit, such as love and joy and peace and long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all of this is taught to us by the Spirit of the Lord. And He is constantly reminding us to walk in that way, to walk in a virtuous manner. Now, another way that virtue can be instilled into someone's life is not only can it be taught, but it can also be caught. And from a negative standpoint, right, we know that bad company corrupts good morals. So if you constantly put yourself around those that do not care about virtuous living, be that through your face-to-face interaction with them or through the social media of our day, right, you'll find yourself catching and learning or being taught their ways, and you'll find yourself drifting from the quality of virtue in your daily life. And of course, to the contrary of that, when you surround yourself with virtuous people, you will catch and learn to walk in uprightness. So my answer here may be a little bit more than what the question asks for, but thanks be to God for those that train up their children in the way that they should go, the ways of virtue and the ways of righteousness. And thanks be to God for His Holy Spirit that indwells the believer and keeps them on the path of righteousness, right? It keeps them in that virtuous way, walking in moral goodness. And this only comes about when we yield ourselves to the leading of the Holy Spirit, just like one that is taught virtue by their parents. This only comes about when they yield in obedience to the teaching of their parents, and they begin to walk in that way. So we'll go ahead and close it here for today. God bless. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, whichever the case may be. You can find us on YouTube under A Love Outreach. You can subscribe to us there, or we are on various podcast platforms as well under the name A Love Outreach. Any questions, you can reach me directly, dave@aloveoutreach.com. That's dave@aloveoutreach.com. God bless, and we will see you next time.